of which we may grab 20 as a memory. So there's many different vibrational levels that are going on that are going to be intruded upon by the forces that we find outside of Earth. Now, if we go back the other way and talk to the Chinese and the Taoists, they say we'll never be able to grow plants in space because there's no source of yin energy. That we are yang creatures on a yin planet, but that we're complementary, and without one, the other cannot exist. And we see this physiologically. You put humans into space, they instantly bloat up. All kinds of strange things happen to their systems, and we can't overcome them, and they can't stay up there forever.
Interesting. So if we are yang on a yin planet, doesn't the solution mean to create a yin environment?
If we could generate yin energy, that would be the ability to do that. But basically, you're talking about manipulating things beyond the electromagnetic radiation. So if I'm correct in the understanding, let's postulate for a second that the base energy resonance of the whole universe is at 22 trillion times a second. Well, electricity is way up here at maybe 60, 80, 100 times a second, that kind of thing. So there's a huge gap. And yin energy arrives out at the 22 trillion times a second generational level, and we cannot push our consciousness and our ability to manipulate universe so far down much below the atomic level. In fact, these guys over there in your husband's neck of the woods in Austria with their CERN collider are chasing unicorns. There are no subatomic particles. Their whole postulate is bogus, and I'm assuming that they know that, and the collider is for some other purpose.
Oh, that is very interesting, because I know that they were credited with, about 1983, the same group over there in CERN, with finding some other boson.
Yeah, and they're just applying different names to the same kind of thing. If you go back and read the Vedas, for instance, and read into Sanskrit, there's a particular area where they describe, actually it's even within Patanjali in the yogic tradition, where they describe reality as being an expression of a collision of energies that come through in the form of 66,000 aspects. And so you can think of it as our template, and every time these energies collide, it can have some collection of 66,000 aspects, which include things like gravity, heat, cold, etc., and so on. But basically, it's the same, as Buddha called it, the indefinable or indivisible unit. And there is nothing below that, because it's an energetic collision, not an actual point of matter. And so what they're doing is going through and cataloging these 66,000 aspects. It's like, well, I can point to a book that's done it for you.
That's what you think CERN is doing. Well, if they're not doing that, what could they be doing?
Well, there's the rub. That gets us back to the Nazis. It gets us back to the hierarchical structure of the academia that we have now that denies so much knowledge to us, all the forbidden archaeology, etc., and runs us all the way back to the real energies. Theoretically, it's possible that if you generated, you've heard the rumors of the Montauk Project and all of this, the Philadelphia experiment, too high an electrical rate. And as a welder, I know you get the welding torch out there, or the welding arc out there, and you're not wearing a mask, you're going to get a sunburn. You're going to peel the surface of your skin right off if you're too close to it. And it has to do with the side form of the helical radiation that comes from the expression of electricity in a destructive state. And need not get down in there, but basically I think they're attempting to do some really nasty sorts of experiments that, while they won't result in a black hole, they might not be good for humanity as a whole.
Oh boy, we're going to have to get into those when we come back. On the other side of this break, I'm talking with Clif from Half Past Human, and as I said, the best is yet to come, so stay with us here on Rumor Mill News Radio on the Micro Effect Radio Network. You're listening to Rumor Mill News Radio. I'm talking with Clif, and we just were talking about CERN, and he said it might be some very nasty experiments which are not good for the human race. What do you think they may be doing?
Well, if you go back to you can read a number of the researchers out there that have done a great deal of work, starting with Richard Hoagland and work your way through Mr. Mars and all these people that associate Nazis with the current structure of basically the academic world and the Western sphere of civilization. And they apparently are running things. We know that there's all kinds of denied existing evidence for alternative explanations, everything from biology through to electromagnetism. And they're suppressing all of this because they don't want us to have a certain level of knowledge. Now, I'm presuming, because of the huge amount of money that's been invested in the direction in which they're taking this particular kind of a structure, that they're investigating some of these parameters about the various layers of vibration that go down to this 22 trillion times a second level, with the intention of being able to manipulate those layers to their advantage. And basically what you can think of it is as reaching through the underlying illusion of reality and being able to manipulate these templates or these 66,000 aspects and cause things to occur. So a benign form of it, if they could get hold of that energy, would be, as I would say, a replicator, where you could take a cherry and put it in there, and it would take an image of a cherry, and then you could just use energy and produce a duplicate, 100% identical cherry, which would be nutritious, etc. And that would be kind of a cool thing. But in order to get at that, they're going to be messing with some of the very fundamental nature or building blocks of nature. And I don't trust these people.
Yes, I agree with that completely.
Now, it's not that it's to say that their motivations might be bad at the individual scientist level. I'm just saying I don't trust their grasp of the universe and the structure in which they're operating and the people that are pulling their strings.
Well, it was so funny that after they cranked it up and it got started, something happened and now it's shut down again.
Yes. And that actually showed up in our data a number of times, that they were going to be trying to juggle 5 oranges at a time and keep dropping them. And that was the data set way of suggesting that there's so many variables and factors, they're going to keep stumbling their toe, breaking this, breaking that, having this other thing adjusted wrong, which causes this other part to break, and so on.
Okay, I'm going to leave this because we've only got a half hour, and I want to get on to crop circles and what you think they are.
Well, we have to look at crop circles in a strange way, actually. They're more real than the abstractions of money and derivatives, which are, paper debt. Crop circles are appearing right in front of our face. I think of them as glyphs. Glyphs are pictorial representations or diagrammic or graphic representations in an attempt to communicate. Now, I have noticed that crop circles can be broadly split into 3 categories. The one small category is the drunk human out there with a stick and some string. Those are actually relatively small and minor, and we needn't concern ourselves with those. The other major ones we can think of as the natively appearing or non-human crop circles or glyphs fall into 2 categories in a broad sense. One is the communication through some kind of a complex geographic or geometric construction. And these are really cool things, and they look neat, and they bedazzle the eye just looking at them sitting there. Then there's the other kind of crop circles, which the long one recently at Clatford, 800 feet long, and it is basically a bunch of balls and sticks, if you will, a bunch of spheres and lines connected together. And that falls into the category of what I think of as character representations, or another attempt to communicate to us via abstraction. In other words, we've had some of the crop circles that quite clearly show Mayan glyph, Mayan graphic style representations that point to and can be decoded as a temporal representation towards 2012. We've also had astronomic representations of the alignment at that particular point in time show up in crop circles. So those are in that broad category of communication via other means. And then there's the geometric ones. Now, the geometric ones may offer multiple layers of data within them or specific effects to be created at energetic levels, and that's why I got into the process of what we call the crop swirlies, which is a program you can download that allows you to spin these things. And if you spin the reduced diagrammic image, you get strange visual effects from them. And we've also had persistent physical effects reported by people that are very sensitive to it. So as an instance, I do a particular type of meditation that's based on the Hui Ming Ching and goes back to Taoist roots. And I know that I can look at a particular crop circle, spin it counterclockwise, and run it for, a couple of minutes. And the meditative effect on my visualization lasts several hours. So in that sense, we get a persistent effect off them, and a lot of other people are also reporting that. Now, we can leave the geometric ones aside because we have yet to produce enough of a taxonomy, enough of an analysis of circle spinning, rate spinning, and any kind of an effect to have any meaning out of them. And that leaves us with this rather large group that is the more communicative side. These I am under the assumption that these are an attempt at communication. And that's kind of why I wrote that article or that essay in rebuttal of the idea that the Clatford crop circle was a sigil. Because sigils are an attempt to obscure communication and use them as a method of encoding. And I'm operating under the assumption that, A, humans didn't produce this, and whatever did produce it went to a lot of trouble to produce it, and a lot of energy in there, and they're not going to do so in order to hide information from us. The whole point would be to cause some level of communication and hopefully start some level of bi-consciousness interaction. And under those circumstances, you're not going to try and obscure communications. Make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
So in that sense, then we start decoding them based on what is there. So in the case of the Clatford one, it's a bunch of straight lines and circles in specific relations to each other. And if you look at it based on the following assumption, and that assumption is that whoever's attempting to communicate with us will use various different methods of doing so to try and get their point across. And while some things are clearly astronomical in the sense of the Earth orbit and so on, other methods of communication to try and get across more abstract ideas might use different levels of abstraction based on some underlying concept that we can think of as a universal constant. In other words, no matter where these things are coming from, this universe or other universes, presumably they are under the impression that we understand concepts like cycles, circles, straight line connectors, reference marks, those kind of things that would normally evolve in a galactic kind of a sense. And so they would not, for instance, try and communicate with us using metaphoric references to baseball games, because baseball games wouldn't be ubiquitous throughout the galaxy, and they could only count on us being able to have things like astronomy or astrology. Make sense again?
It makes sense perfectly to me, yes.
And then you just start going through and you decode. We have some excellent researchers out there. Again, everybody from Hoagland and Wilcock all the way through to Maurice Cottrell, who have found various different kinds of reference points in reality that we can use, if you will, to fold information on itself and derive higher levels of meaning. And I've actually found some within recent crop circles this year. Crop circles are very interesting, too, because they're in a building pattern that can be plotted relative to the building pattern of the natural disasters. In other words, we've had more crop circles appear more regularly in more consistent locations since the tsunami than we had before. And before, we had a building pattern that has built up over time that, if plotted against large earthquakes and other natural disasters like giant hurricanes and stuff, it appears as though they're attempting to send more of these things to communicate more information to us, or at least create more opportunities. And it has the feeling of a pressure or a stress. In other words, time's getting short. And then we actually have the strange crop circles of 2002 that communicated to us in ASCII, American Standard Computer Information Interchange language.
Incredible. We're coming up to a break, but I just wanted to say this Austrian husband that I was married to was a high-ranking member of the Esterházy family of Hungary. And the Esterházys, the name means from the star.
Mm-hmm.
They believe they are Syrian, that they came from Sirius, and they're here on the planet. And Gunther always referred to the crop circles as being made by his people with